Hey Thad, what's going on with the podcast? Hey, what's happening with the podcast? Bro, are you still continuing the podcast? Whew. That has been the question for a while. And that is what we are going with this title. What's going on with the podcast? So, as I said to y'all this season, starting it off, keeping it raw, authentic. So, I'm gonna break it down for y'all of like what was going on with me, the podcast, everything. And if you stick around, I feel as though if you're also a creator and you also have something you have going on or you're working with or you have a gift in something, sit back because you may be experiencing this. You may have experienced this in the past, or you may possibly experience this in the future. And if so, you're prepared and you kind of have an idea of what someone else has done to overcome it. All right, so let's break this down. That what's going on with the podcast? So the first thing is internally, there was a lot that I was going through with the podcast. So the first point is that I literally could not just crank out as many episodes because of my work schedule. And I was also comparing myself to the old me, as in the Thad that started the podcast, versus the current me who's like full time, having a house, in a relationship, all types of things. So the conflict was the old me. I was working part time. I was really excited about the podcast, creating it. My whole purpose was just like, man, there are a lot of people in this world that's just really, they don't know how to connect with people. They weren't taught how to connect with people. And so I know I have a gift with that. Let's start a podcast and teach people. And that's where it was. So I was cranking out about 2 episodes a week now. So that's what, two, four, six, eight, about 8 episodes a month. And things were going good. It was the beginning, I was growing, I was exciting, I was telling everybody everything that was going on. And I wanted to keep that consistency. And so that was what I was struggling with in the beginning was consistency. And I I really, really, really wanted to just, go out and just make these episodes, make the time for it and things like that. But my reality was not matching up with where I was when I started the podcast. So I started the podcast, I want to say maybe in 2019. So it's been a few years now. And so the podcast was growing. Um, I'm at a point where now I'm no longer just kind of working part time and the house was kind of taken care of. So things changed where I had to work full time. You kind of grow up a little bit, switch careers, fields and things like that. I was a server. I think at the time, either I was a server or something. So I had money coming in, and I was good. But my mother passed away, a lot of things changed. I had to kind of step up as far as like house stuff, which I've talked about. If you've been following the podcast, we've talked about that, death and things like that. But just giving you all the raw, authentic things behind the scenes of what was going on was that I was living. It was my stepdad, my stepbrother, stepsister, and it was me. And so things just shifted, because now that my mom's income wasn't coming in, my stepdad was taking a lot of the load. And so I didn't like that. And, he was even saying as well, like, hey, you don't have to get a full time, look, something that pays you more. And I want to say my stepdad wasn't pushy. He wasn't like, hey, since your mom went, you need to do, he wasn't like that at all. he's a very hardworking person, great man, and things like that. And he literally stepped up completely, like times 10 after my mom passed. So I had to just kind of switch jobs, and I also had plans for Connect 7 that I wanted to do. And I also wanted to take some of that load off of, my stepdad, which, mind you, this man was working two jobs. He went to sleep. He he worked. If he was off, he was still doing things. So he was a very productive man, right? So switching into full time, my hours have changed, sleeping schedules changed. And then being with the full time, it was just a lot of demand. So my creativity, or creating content, kind of tanked. It really tanked, and I had to really focus on getting the income, which all of us have been there when it comes to something that you're working on, be it a business, things like that, being whatever it is. Sometimes life stuff, you got to step up, things change. For me, what bothered me was that I really wanted to be, again, that old me who had the time to do it, but the reality of it just wasn't hitting. So I did get to a point where I had to reduce the amount of episodes I was creating. And instead of like two a week, I think I did maybe like once a week. And that was fine for some time. And we were doing it. I think I was still maybe in season two of the episodes. I was doing videos, recording them. So it was working. But I want to say on that first part, what I struggled with was, again, the comparison from the full time me to the part time me, and the consistency. Again, I'm sure that's something y'all went through. So things again changed where, like I said, after my mom passed, I had to, get a new job. There was also personal things, which I really can't think of, but I just know I just had a lot that I had to like maneuver through. So that's why the podcast like paused. And that bothered me a lot, like more than because I had to pause it, then I would try to resume it. Shit happens again. I had to pause it. As y'all know, who've been following the podcast since day one, I'm sure y'all noticed, like, okay, this man's been pausing the podcast, like, what's going on? And so that question comes back to what's going on with the podcast. So that was part of it, and then things evolved. So in the part of me just like pausing, the podcast was always on my mind, and I literally just struggled with keeping it going. It then emotionally it changed from something that I enjoyed and loved to it became like a chore, and it instead was like, okay, I kind of have to do this because I'm trying to keep this consistency. So it went from I enjoy to I have to, right? And with that, I was also in this process where I wanted to make it a business, right? Now, what y'all don't know, I don't think no one knows this, so now everybody's better know it. But what no one don't know, that doesn't even sound right. But anyways, um, what people didn't know was that I started the podcast, and I eventually wanted it to, protect it. And so I was like, yeah, I want to make sure no one takes my name. So I was like, well, I'll make a business out of it. And so that's what I did. And I was going through that route of like protecting it, business, this, that, and the other. And so I jumped into a business, not necessarily for gains. It was more like, okay, I'll get that eventually, but I'm doing it to protect it. So I jumped into business for the wrong reasons. And it was really out of fear because I really wanted to protect my podcast, we'll say, and the name of it and stuff like that, because they was talking about trademarking, copywriting, this, that, and the other. And I was like, okay, that sounds very business. So I guess I got to do it like a business. I don't know. And so again, this was early stages, and that's what I did. And so it went from like a chore to like a business because then there's other things that I had to do to protect it. I was trying to sell t-shirts. Eventually, like I did products and that became a thing. So it went from like it went from something I started that was fun to evolved into other things. And out of that fear that kind of opened up other channels, which I'm grateful that I learned, but again, I started a business for the wrong reason. So that's when it just, again, became even harder now to do episodes. I was trying to promote stuff. Again, if y'all been following, y'all know this. Y'all be like, oh, okay. Probably a lot of dots are going to start clicking. So it just wasn't fun anymore. That was another thing that was going on with the podcast. We're going to our third point was when I paused it, I was really just trying to get my shit together with life stuff outside of the podcast. And then once the podcast was growing and stuff like that, the podcast then became a responsibility to me and it grew into a huge responsibility. So when I was asked about the podcast, I always felt like it was a huge responsibility that I was avoiding because people was like, "What's going on with the podcast? Well, what's happening here? Or, you bet not stopping." I was like, I plan on keeping it, but right now I got bills to pay and I got other stuff going on, bro. So it'll come, and so it it eventually I kind of got to a point where I was like, you know what? Let me just kind of get back into it again. And so it was unpaused. And so I did like a bit of like a spin-off season. So it was like right after season two, it was just different stuff that I was doing. And I enjoyed it, but then my responsibilities changed. And then I took up a another job. And so I yeah, I took up a couple of other full-time jobs after that. I think I was working for a company called Transcom, and it was pretty much like a third-party company. And with that, we were servicing Apple, so it was fully remote. Before that, I was working at Walgreens, so I was just like, okay, I want to do something remote because that way I can have the time to focus on the podcast, right? No, that did not happen. Complete failure. That job literally fucked me up. I'm talking about like it mentally ruined me to where my mental health just was just not it after that. Like my hours were late at night, so from like 3 to 11, and you may think that's not bad, but by the time you get off, you're getting some sleep, and by the time you wake up, for me at least, by the time I woke up, I had about a few hours before I had to go right back into it again. And not only that, but most things are closed. I can't go out with friends like that because while they're, I would say, while they are up and working, I'm still asleep. And then by the time I wake up, I have to eat breakfast and I'm about to go back to work. So 3 to 11, everybody's doing things. When I'm free after work, everybody's going to sleep. So it just wasn't it. And so that just kind of fucked me up even more. And like I said, that feeling plus I did this so I can get into the podcast and to not be able to do the podcast. That took another hit, like with myself, like, bruh, I'm trying, but it's not it. So I would make these choices so that I can fulfill this responsibility that it became, and it just wasn't working, right? And that was another thing. That fucked me up mentally and emotionally. So as I was trying to get back in the podcast, I was like, okay, let me rebrand it, do something different, add different stuff. And so in that process, I was conflicted on K7, Connect 7, but if y'all don't know, I'd be giving it a nickname K7, but I was conflicted on K7 being like a business I was starting and then me not realizing that I was at the center of what the brand stood for. Now that may not make sense, but like when you're a creator or you're in the middle, we'll say creator business owner, you're kind of in the midst of everything that comes with it, I want to say you kind of forget some things that may seem simple. Meaning like you're so in the sauce of everything that like you're the face of the sauce. And it's just like, yeah, that's cute and all, but while you're talking, I got to get the bottle to put the sauce in. I got to acquire the ingredients. I got to cook it. I have to label it. I have to make sure that everything in between is working. I got to talk to this person, that person. So it's just like, yeah, I'm the face of it, sure, but baby, I got all this stuff that I got to do too. So you kind of forget that. And my cousin and my girlfriend was just like, hey, like, when I think of Connect Seven, I really just think of you because you're the one that's connecting people. You're the connector. You're the face of it. And I heard that, but it just didn't really click because of everything that I had to do. So I eventually was like, okay, let me kind of take some of this burdens off of, okay, this is what I have to do. So I had my brother take on like the video editing, adding different things, sounds and stuff like that, because that's what I was doing. So I would record the raw stuff, send it to him. He would do the editing, send it back. So that took a load off. And so I was trying these different things, but I had stuff going on. My brother had stuff going on. Again, life stuff took happen. And so things had to change, with that. And again, I was trying to add new stuff. So again, it was a lot of conflictions, but when you're in the middle of it, it's like, again, you get lost in the sauce with it. So now something else that was going on, which is another point, is the podcast, it evolved and it grew heights that I wasn't planned for, and I didn't have a plan on where I wanted to take it. So I had a bit of a structure, but not really. When it came to the episodes itself, I had a structure for that. So I knew, okay, let me jot down my notes. Let me jot down what I want to talk about. I had a structure for the episodes. However, the podcast grew to where I was having guest speakers on, loved them. I was then I went from connecting, starting off by myself to connecting with other people to now it went to like businesses, then it went to people who were just in certain positions of things. And it went more kind of like a business route. And it was still focused on connections, but because connection was so broad, I could talk to people with business, I could talk to people with different things. It just evolved into many different heights that I was not prepared for or had a structure for. It even like even there was the podcast when I would have to go look through some things. The podcast was getting um, recognized in different parts of the world. So it grew outside of Florida. I remember it to this day. It was growing from Florida, then it was like a little bit of Georgia, a little bit of Washington, Cali, and it was like these little dots on the map that I would see when I was seeing what was, the stats of the podcast. And then I started seeing things in Europe and in the islands, Canada, and I was just like, oh wow, okay, like it's growing. Okay, that's cool. And so it then became this like, okay, I definitely got to keep it going because, hey, these people are listening and I don't want to let them down type shit. And so the podcast, like I said, it just grew and I didn't really have a structure for that. So I was just going with it. And I think I would get to the point, no, I did get to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm in this space and I don't really know where to go or where to take it. So I would try to ask my listeners, okay, well, what is it that y'all want to listen to? So I was trying to do like little forms, like a mini form for people to fill out. Not like people were good at listening, but when it came to like doing like the little forms, you're like, yeah, no. And so I was like, okay, that was me trying to like, okay, well, what do y'all want to hear? Because I have many different things, but I want to at least like hone it in on something. So I was trying to focus the podcast on things, but I didn't really have that focus. So I was looking for that structure, kind of asking for it. I didn't get it. So it was like, okay, you got to figure it out. And so I learned that when I didn't really have a direction, that hindered me and it slowed me down. It's kind of like it's literally kind of like you just got this. this brand new car, and you've driven it a little bit and you find out you have all these features in this car, but now you're in the car and it's just like, okay, well, where do I go? Like, I have this car and I can go wherever I want, but I don't know where I want to. I don't have a direction. Like, I could go to Georgia, but what's in Georgia for what's my destination there? What am I doing there? So it's kind of like having this platform and not really know what you're doing with it. And you're trying, but it just wasn't working. So that hindered me too. And for those of you who, again, who are creating, who are doing things, if you don't really have a direction or vision with it, which mind you, I did have a huge vision, but it just evolved to where I didn't know where to take it. So if you find yourself in that moment or have been in there, like, hey, I guess it happens. But for those of you who've never been through it, that's the best way I can describe it to you. And that again caused me to pause the podcast because I was really trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So again, for those of you who have been following for so long, this should start making some sense with why this boy, I kept pausing it all the time. And as I was going through my own life stuff, I was constantly reminded that I shouldn't stop it. It was way too many signs. I'm talking about the spirits, the ancestors, the people I've never met coming up to me. It's like, hey, like, I feel like you should do something where I don't know if it's like public speaking or something, but like, yeah, like your voice. And I'm talking about like it was signs everywhere. So not only am I trying to figure it out and I'm going through it like with what I'm doing with it, and I had to pause it and I'm trying to figure out life stuff, but I'm again now externally I'm being reminded constantly you shouldn't stop it. And it got to a point where I was like, I'm just gonna leave it alone and then I will figure it out. So that was everything that was going on in the past, and we're gonna catch up to the most current. Okay, so whew, currently, mm, this is more up to date. We'll say the most up to date. So at the time, I then took on a full-time position at Brightline. So for those of you who live in the South Florida area, you know about Brightline, the train, the new, like, it's like a luxury train station for those of you who don't know. It connects South Florida and it's working to connect North Florida. I believe they just started Orlando. So this is like a luxury train that connected Miami, Aventura, Fort Lauderdale, Boca, and West Palm. And then now it's going to Orlando and eventually Tampa. So I started there. Great company, loved the company. And then I ended up being promoted to, we'll say in a management position, just to keep it simple. I got promoted into a management position. So and Brightline is still a startup company. So my hours were demanding and it changed. So I went from kind of like maybe 8-ish hours to, easily 10 to 12 hours easily every day. And my hours constantly change. One minute I was working morning shifts, I was working night shifts, and these weren't the regular nights. Like if I started at 4 a.m., I'm not going to get home till probably 2, no, I'm pushing it. I probably won't get home to like 3 a.m. If so, mind you, 4 p.m. to 3 a.m., going back to sleep to redo all that over again. If I'm working a morning shift, that means I have to be to work by 4 a.m. and I may get off between 2 to 5 p.m. So emphasis on these twos, like yeah, my hours changed. So it was very demanding. So I didn't have the time. I wanted to record, but I didn't have the time, the energy to do it. And with my job there, it was again very demanding. And not in a negative sense, it's just like in the management, there's a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes that I had to like focus on. So that really took my time away from the podcast. Like I literally didn't have it. I met amazing people, and people were like, "Yeah, like I know, I heard you do a podcast," and people was like, "Hey, man, if you ever do one, I would love to be a guest speaker." And I was like, "Well, whenever I get back to it, we'll see what happens." So again, I had a bunch of life stuff that was happening as a creator. I got to give it to y'all for who kind of manages that better. I had again a bunch of responsibilities that packed up. So not only was it work, but then my girlfriend moved in as well. So I had to learn how to, like, our relationship changed to where now, it was long distance to now we live together. So I had that aspect of my life. Then when she moved in, then my stepdad and his kids, they moved out. And so it was just me and her running the house. So I was now homeowner, um, relationship, full-time job, family things in between. When I'm off, I'm tired. I had so much stuff that I had to like deal with. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I had the time to do the podcast. However, I didn't have the energy. I'm gonna just keep it a buck with you. I did not have the energy to do it. It was just like, okay, I can do it, but I'm not gonna give you the best of me. And one of my hidden rules, or I can't think of the word I'm looking for. What is just something about me, like I will not create a podcast episode if I'm not at my best, or I'm not giving you 100% like excellent quality. If I can't, if that's not it, I will not record an episode. So all of that was happening with what was going on with the podcast. Like there was so much stuff that I had to handle with that. And I'm honestly going to go deeper on the next episode, maybe more on the financial hardship one, where I talk more so with the homeowning, housing, homeowning, car, everything in there. You guys will literally be the first people to know. And when I say first people, like my family don't even know as in depth that I'm going to tell you guys. So, like I said, raw and in depth. So, that's for another episode. But that was a lot of stuff that was just going on, and I just could not do a podcast with everything going on. And what's crazy about all this is that I knew that I have a gift for the podcast, and again, creating these episodes, talking with people, connecting with people, sharing the things that I've learned, sharing just different stuff like that. And what I came to discover was that I experienced a lot of, the best way I can say is like build up. And that's kind of like emotionally, like it affected me emotionally, mentally, spiritually, things like that. So because I wasn't in like doing things with this gift of mine, it was causing like build up within like my energy, my spirit and stuff like that. So I would find myself either like my heart was like my heart was beating like harder at some points. I would be kind of a bit irritated, a little bit more easier with people and things. Um, the best way I can describe it is just like I said, it just my thoughts were, I couldn't focus as much as I was. And I say all of that to say like the podcast is like, okay, hey, this is your outlet for creativity, right? It's like, okay, you get information in, but now you need to share that information. And because I was just experienced that build up in all these different areas of my life. And I will say, if you are a person who have a gift in something and you're not using it, I'm pretty sure you're experiencing, if not exactly what I'm going through, something similar to, it's always in the back of your mind. No matter what you do, no matter what's going on, your gift or whatever you do for it, it's always in the back of your mind to do something for it. You're always thinking of ways. That's how it was for me. And if you're not doing it, you're definitely feeling it one way or the other. And if it's not one way, you may feel it all ways. So that's what I was going through. Now, I will say that bringing y'all up to current um, fad is about a month, a little over a month, and there's going to be 2 weeks since we've been in this city coming up. So a little under 6 weeks, we'll say. I arrived in New Zealand. So I moved from the South Florida, the States, to New Zealand, and that's where I'm at now. Everything is amazing here, but I will share all of that in another episode because we'll be here forever. But since I've gotten here, I've been able to get into a place where I'm more relaxed. I'm able to process everything more. I have the time to. I'm not in America where I have so much stuff going on and feel like a robot and feel like this, that, and the other. So I'm in a better place essentially. And so after like meditation, speaking like, in my internal self, my spirit, my soul, it was just like, hey, definitely get back into it now. Like you have a lot of things you can talk about. And I was like, okay, you know what, let's do it. Let me get all of my stuff out of my suitcase, put it into a different room, and just kind of go from there. And here we are. So I would say this. The lesson in this episode is when you don't use your gift, it will fuck you up internally. Let me say that again. When you don't use your gift, it will fuck you up internally. You can run away from it, but when you walk in it, other parts of your life will literally improve. So I will say, in me even recording this episode, it feels as though like if you've been going through something, we'll say pain, right? Let's say if you've been going through some type of pain and you like take something and you feel that pain wearing off. That's the best way I can describe it. It's like, okay, as I'm doing this episode, it's just like, this feels good. There's still a lot in there, but this feels good. I'm letting it out, and it's just something that's just like, yeah, you got to do it. And for some of you who, again, you have a gift, you have something out there that you're really good at doing, that you bring to the world. And if you're not like utilizing it, because some people say if you don't use it, you lose it. And I will say, in these few years that I've had to pause and stop, I don't really think you ever lose it. I think that you start to get used to ignoring it. You tolerate the thoughts and the feelings that come with not doing it. So I wouldn't say it's lost. You may have to kind of, dust some things off, get back into the flow, but I don't really think you lose your gift. And like I say, my thoughts and feelings it was always on my mind. Internally, I would just feel like, again, I'm backed up. And that feeling was always there and it trickled, not trickled, it poured into other parts of my life. And it became noticeable with my partner. Those around me, I was a bit different. And again, if you have that gift, you're probably experiencing that now if you're in the same scenario that I was in, or you probably can relate if that's where you were too if you didn't do it. But that's the biggest lesson I gained from all of this. And I really feel like it's something that you all can, gain some things too, or get some experience and be like, huh, okay, I see. So I would also add on to this with this episode, I would say to take away from this to give to you is that whatever you're good at, do something with it every day if you can. Do something towards it. You're going to feel so much better internally, externally. Your life will start to change and evolve in amazing ways. And you have it for a reason. I also say, and I don't know, I might be having a moment here, but I'd also say like you may discover more of your purpose, or hey, like, while you're here with the gift that you have, you may not understand it all right now, but as you follow it, you'll get a little bit more um, pieces to the puzzle. So for everybody that's been asking, what's going on with the podcast? Now you know what has been going on. And honestly, I feel better that I haven't like even told y'all, because I was just like, oh yeah, y'all need to know, because I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who's been in some like a certain scenario like this. So with that, guys, that is the end of episode one. And there's so much more. There's so much more later on, because that was just the tip of the iceberg. Y'all wanted to know what was going on with the podcast, and now you know. So we're gonna go deeper into just everything, because whew, when I tell y'all life was beating my ass, I'm talking about ooh, life was beating my ass worse than a black mama find out that you done spent all her money at the candy store. I don't know, bro. It was just crazy. I promise you, but y'all gonna have some laughs, I'm pretty sure. Definitely the lessons and things like that. But I look forward to sharing all the craziness that's happened. And also in the process, y'all can relate and y'all can grow from it too. So with that being said, guys, this is the end of episode one, or season three, episode one. Thank you so much for taking the time to press play. And I look forward to connecting with y'all even further. Also, I forget. Let me say this now. I'm kind of getting in the habit of this. For those of you who have been following me for some time, I do have a website now that's I'm going to use as the center hub for Connect 7. So the website is called connect7.space. So that will literally be the space for everything. I have links to the IG, to the TikTok. Um, Maybe later on down the line, I may add more things in the future. So you can also hear the podcast on the site as well. But that's where I'll be going, putting more stuff. If you also want to subscribe to like my newsletter, you can do that on the site. It's like on the homepage. So that way, if I'm cranking out some ideas or I'm cooking up something, y'all will be the first to know. But with that, guys, that is it. Thank you so much. Keep being amazing. I look forward to connecting with y'all all over the world now. That being said, have a good night, y'all. Later, later.